What's up, guys? Today we're going to talk about consciousness and what it even is. In my first video, I talked about how nothing physical is actually physical. If you want to see that, links in the description below. Nothing physical is actually physical. We are consciousness. We are all one thing experiencing all that it is. And consciousness is the vehicle through which we go through and experience all that we are. So when you start to realize that the universe is not physical, you start to really branch out and start to be open to all ideas. And once you understand that we are source is us, everything is mental, it really does mean that anything is possible. So what are the people, what's the information we have that is talking about this non-physical existence? Obviously, there's some who think it's a simulation, like we're AI in a computer or something like that, and there is a lot of similarities, to be honest. But AI and computers and everything are really just sort of a manifestation of our own subconscious or unconscious knowing of what we really are and what our reality really is. And it is a simulation of sorts. It's a simulation going through the mind of God, if you want to put it that way. And so you start to really get into what people are talking about who understand that the universe is mental and not physical, and it's being actively created every single moment, and we are perceiving it, and it is rendering instantaneously with no issues, and so you start to learn about consciousness, and consciousness is something that we won't find in the body, right? You'll think we can hook people up to a brain scan and see the electrical impulses of their thoughts and stuff like that, but you'll never find the commander. You'll never find the one who is observing those thoughts, right? The mind is the thinker, and you can know that the mind is the thinker and separate from you in a way because you're capable of observing it. If you're capable of observing it, that means you are the awareness, the consciousness behind that which is thinking. You can't if you were the thinker, you would not be able to observe your thoughts as they're happening. Thoughts wouldn't just be happening randomly without you thinking them. And yet you're able to think for yourself, and your mind also thinks for itself. It's almost as if they're separate. And that's because the way we have our subconscious through which consciousness is flowing and perceiving at the same time. And we can program our subconscious to behave a certain way. If we never spoke, if we had no words, your mind wouldn't just think words. It wouldn't. It would think in whatever way that thinking was taking place, whether that's just, thinking of the feeling of sensations or thinking of what it needs or wants, but, it would not be thinking in terms of words. The reason we think in terms of words is because we've been talked to our whole life. But before language was a thing, we didn't think in terms of words. So thinking in terms of words is only one small aspect of the totality of consciousness. And so consciousness, this awareness, this vehicle through which source is able to experience everything, even on what appears to be an individual level, even though everything is always together still. There is no separation, is only a perception, not reality underneath it all. And so we get into the community of people who understand consciousness is reality, that you are consciousness, that I am consciousness, and behind that, even more, we are source, and consciousness is a creation of source to experience. And so really, the reason we're here, the reason for anything, is to experience. It's for fun. It's not this super serious thing. We could take things seriously if we want to, but realize that when you're taking something really seriously, you're just playing a role. You're playing a character. That's not who you really are. You know, but we have this idea that everything's so serious, and the reason it feels so serious is because we feel pain. We suffer. And that's where I really want to start here, getting into the 7 densities of consciousness. Now, the 7 densities of consciousness are outlined by a social memory complex known as Ra. Yes, Ra from ancient Egypt. It's what they talk about is called the Law of One. And the Law of One is really about how everything is one thing, experiencing all that it is. And this social memory complex, which is, I know it's a weird term, but it's really a highly evolved group of souls. If you want to think about it that way, it's more complex than that, but that's kind of a simple way. It's a group of highly advanced souls that have evolved to a certain point where the individual self is no longer recognized. Rather, the collection of all those experiences and all that information is comprised into this one entity known as Ra. And Ra shared this information with the pharaohs and those groups back in ancient Egypt. And of course, it was the information was manipulated, kept secret, taught as in the mystery schools back then and stuff. And but in the 1980s, the Law of One was channeled by a group of 3 people. Don't have the names off the top of my head, but I'll put them in the description below as well. But they found a way to use quantum healing hypnosis, the quantum healing hypnosis technique, QHHT, which basically you put one person into a deep level of hypnosis, and then they are in their subconscious. They have access to their subconscious. And that means that they're more easily able to communicate, to channel information based on their frequencies. And so they channeled Ra somehow. The person they were using was a great match, a great fit, and able to have one of the people in their group of 3 was able to ask questions. The other person was writing everything down, and the person under hypnosis was basically not conscious to what they were doing or saying or anything like that. They would have these sessions for 2, 3, 4 hours, and they believe they did over 100 sessions with Ra, and she didn't remember really anything from what she was saying while under this hypnosis, but all this information came through, and they were able to ask really amazing and important questions and get really complex but amazing answers from Ra on the true nature of reality, of consciousness, and everything. And what they outlined was right here, these 7 densities of consciousness. And I do apologize if this ends up being backwards. I'm not sure, but I will read them to you. So the first density of consciousness is simply beingness. The simple awareness of being. And so all organic matter, or what appears as organic matter in consciousness, is at this first density of consciousness. There is no self-awareness, there is no movement, action, no choices. It's just existing. And the four elements of air, earth, water, and fire are in this as well. Everything that we see that appears to be just organic, natural matter that's not alive from our perspective falls into this category. And truth is, you spent billions of years experiencing this. In the second density of consciousness, that involves growth and movement. So you could think of animals, plants, microbial life, bacteria, all these different forms of life that are not self-aware, but they are moving, they are eating, they are growing, dividing, learning. There is some type of sense of individuality, of being separate from something else, no longer being just part of the whole. And so this develops until a certain point where self-awareness finally comes into play. Now, all sentient life in all of existence would fall into this third density or higher consciousness level. And so at the third density of consciousness, that's where humans are. All right? We're here to learn through polarity, through contrast, positive and negative. Everything, including consciousness, exists on a spectrum between positive and negative, low and high. So these lower densities of consciousness can be measured in vibrational frequencies. So through a certain amount of density of consciousness, a certain lower vibration would be that of, just the beingness, awareness. A little bit higher frequency would be growth and movement. And then we are in this range of third density where we cannot perceive the higher ones. That's why we don't see interdimensional, multidimensional beings who are higher density than us, even though they may be all around us. Our spirit guides, our higher self, all exist in higher densities all at the same time. They are helping us, they are with us, but we cannot really perceive them with the five physical senses. Instead, there's higher senses that we can learn to develop, and especially as we raise our own frequencies consciously, as we become more aware of ourselves, right? So we all know all people are self-aware to a degree. All right, we've all known someone who seems to be just very not aware, right? They seem completely unaware of how they're being perceived, of what they're doing. They act and react out of habit without having any real thought put into it or being able to consciously choose what they're doing or how they're acting or how they're feeling. Instead, they're just really unconscious. And that all that means is that they're at a earlier stage of the development of the evolution of consciousness than someone who's at the later stages of third density consciousness, where they are much more self-aware, but maybe not totally, and they don't really know, they still don't remember who they are. So there used to be, at third density consciousness, no veil of forgetting, meaning they would go into third density consciousness, they'd still remember who they are, they still remember they're connected to everything. There was no illusion of separation. They would still, but the issue is, evolution at this time took such a long time because they still knew who they were, and the catalyst for evolving the third density of consciousness is psychological suffering. All suffering is psychological. It's because we're perceiving something out of fear. We're perceiving something through the lens of fear, through separation, through doubt, through not believing we're worthy or enough, and not feeling like we have everything we need, even though we always technically do. And this suffering is the only, this density of consciousness is actually the only one that has this suffering, this great suffering. And That's why it's also the shortest density of consciousness, meaning we spend the least amount of time at this density of consciousness out of all the other densities because it is so difficult and challenging. And, so that's why we're going through these karmic patterns, we're going through these karmic cycles, and we're supposed to be learning our lessons. And when we struggle and we don't see the lesson behind things, and the bigger picture really of why it's happening, and trust that it's happening for a reason and that it's actually good for us in the long run, we suffer and we think that life is happening to us. But the reality is life is happening for us. We just have a negative perspective. We have a fearful perspective. We have a low vibrational perspective when those things occur that we perceive as bad, as negative, as tragic, as horrible, as terrible. But they are all serving a purpose, and the purpose is to self-actualize, self-realize. And that is when we get into the fourth density of consciousness, which is associated with the heart. It's about opening your heart, accepting that everything that has happened to you, good and bad, happened for a reason. It happened for you. And it was necessary for your understanding of yourself, your understanding of who you are, and for you to wake up to who you really are and to get out of these karmic cycles, to start to find love and understanding everywhere, right? It's sort of the process of maturing. You become emotionally intelligent. You become energetically intelligent. You start to understand what Nikola Tesla said is, his quote of, if you want to understand the universe and thus yourself, think in terms of energy, vibration, and frequency. And as you start to understand that and what that really implies for you as an individual, it means that you're capable of raising your frequency. You are not a physical being. You're an energetic and emotional being. And to get to that next level of consciousness, you must start to embody that love, that understanding, that initial wisdom of love, and understanding that your power is in your perception. Your power is in how you perceive everything. And that is always your choice. You can look at it in a very negative way because that's what you've learned to do, because others have told you you need to think this way or you need to consider this, and you're not being realistic if you're not considering and embodying the negative side of things. But in reality, the positive is just as valid as the negative, maybe even more so, because the positive perspective is always expanding. It's always growing. It doesn't shrink in on itself. It doesn't seek to separate. Instead, it seeks to unite. And so that's why love is so important, and it's a healthy balance of love of self and love of other, because we understand that we're all really one. You are me, I am you, at the big picture level of things. There is no real separation. There's only the perception of separation. And it's because we are this individual expression of an individual aspect of all that is. And so going from third density to fourth density is a really beautiful thing when it's done, because it's just a transformation that ends suffering for you. It doesn't mean there's not pain, because pain is necessary for growth. Pain is necessary for learning. But the suffering is the unnecessary part of it. The part of it that is purely psychological, because we're not sure how to perceive this, or because we don't know how to trust that what's happening is happening for us. But as we gain faith, trust in ourselves, trust in all that is, trust in other, because other is really self and self is really other, there is no separation. We learn unconditional love, and unconditional love, embodying that, is really the heart of fourth density And so fourth density, you'd still have a chemical body, which is what our bodies are, chemical body. But you also have the beginning of a light body. And so in this fourth density, you can start to astral project and astral travel, and because you've raised up in vibration, now you can start perceiving higher densities of being. You can meet at a certain point with fifth density beings, sixth density beings. And sixth density is really like your higher self, but we'll get right to that. The fifth density is the density of light and wisdom. You no longer need a chemical body. You're just a light body. This would be like, thinking about a lot of the souls who came here, who have come here and stuff from a higher density to help humanity. Think of Jesus, Yeshua. He was a master who came down, incarnated into the third density, embodied fourth density, unconditional love, taught and shared his message with the masses, and eventually then ascended back up to fifth density. But he came down to help us, right? Because during this fall of man over the last 12, 13,000 years, there's been the illusion of separation. And that's what original sin is. That's that wound we all come in, and the common wound that we all share, until we evolve enough to understand that we really aren't separate, that we've always belonged, that we've always been enough, that our value is innate and intrinsic. It's not based on what we produce. It's not based on what we do. It's not based on anything except the fact that we exist and that we are love. Everything is love. And so light and wisdom, you have a light body. You're able to travel wherever you want. You've ascended past space and time, essentially. And so that's the fifth density. And then sixth density is where your higher self resides. And the sixth density is a social memory complex of a group of individuals who have become a higher density being, who have embodied all of that wisdom of love in the lower densities. They understand it all. They see the bigger picture. They're part of it all. And then from there, they go back and they are guiding the lower densities of themselves. And so we are just all connected, all at the same time. In eternity, everything is just happening in one moment. There is no time. Time is a creation of the eternal. And it's just so that there's the perception of a linear path of growth and experience. But at a certain point, time becomes irrelevant because it is an illusion. And it just exists within eternity. Eternity is, there's no beginning, there's no end. It's eternal. It's forever and ever and ever. There is no end. And sixth density is really, getting up to seventh density. Seventh density isn't really talked about a lot because by Ra, because it's at such a high level, it's kind of irrelevant for us. But basically, they're the guides of the higher selves, and it's just this never-ending thing. And then once you get from seventh density to eighth density, it's like a whole new universe starts. You're the creator of this universe and everything. It's a lot. So, but that's basically consciousness. And the reason I really wanted to explain this all is because we are going to start getting into topics that I love to think about and talk about soon, which I really wanted to make a video today about the spiritual ego, and but really we should probably have talked about consciousness first, so that's why I'm making this one. I hope that you enjoyed it. Again, links to other videos to my Facebook page in the description below, as well as my email and website if you want to reach out. Again, I'm an awakening and self-love coach. If you want to work with me and start evolving, start expanding your consciousness, if you want someone to tell you you're not crazy, I'm your guy, So thank you for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next video.